Hi, this is Lindsay, one of the co-hosts of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Rachel Mullins, host of #NoFilterFriday here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my new show, #NoFilterFriday, where we talk about all of the sexual misconduct allegations swirling around Hollywood. A new show drops every Friday at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of #NoFilterFriday. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Today's verse of the day comes from 2 Peter 3:14. So then, dear friends, since you are looking forward to this, make every effort to be found spotless, blameless, and at peace with Him. Good morning and welcome to the Verse of the Day podcast presented by Public House Media. I'm your host, Baxter Colburn. Thanks so much for being a part of the show today as we get ready for a weekend. We are excited here at Verse of the Day as we have so many great things to be thankful for. As you heard me say on the podcast yesterday, there is official Verse of the Day merchandise now that you can purchase, and I highly recommend that you go and do that by heading over to thephmedia.com, and then from there you can go to the store and check out Verse of the Day and just network apparel as a whole too. There's something for everyone, which is fantastic. As we always ask as well too, if you want to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, we would be just over the moon grateful if you'd be willing to do so and give us a 5-star rating if that's what you think of the show. And even if you don't think the show is worth 5 stars, be honest and give it a rating and review as well too. That's the only way we know how to grow, so we appreciate the feedback. Today's verse of the day, as we mentioned, comes from that 2 Peter 3:14. And I think this verse is something that we've heard in a lot of variations throughout our time as Christians, and as we've continued to learn and study as well, too. I think those last couple of words is what really is important for us to hone in on, because we need to really make every effort to be found spotless, blameless, and at peace with Him. Who Him? God Him. That's who is Him. And I think that is so important for us today, as we are filled with so much temptation, so much sin, so many distractions in our world. This is so important for us to lean in on, because we need to understand that we are going to get tempted daily. We are going to get pushed to our limits, but ultimately no one knows the time nor the place when God Himself, when Jesus is coming back to save us from this broken earth, this broken world that we live in. And I don't know about you, but when Jesus comes back, I want to be found as spotless, as blameless, and at peace with Him as possible. So, looking at these 3 words specifically, spotless. We all know what spotless is, right? We see this on cleaning commercials all the time. We see this on detergent commercials. How do you get found spotless? Well, spotless is when there are no blemishes, there's no dirt, there's no grime. It's all been washed away, and whatever the original color, the original product was when it was new and perfect before it was ruined, has been restored, right? And that's what Jesus wants for us as well, too. We used to be this pure, perfect form made in God's image. We still are made in God's image, but when Adam and Eve sinned and fell away, and sin entered the world, that's when we started to fall away and started to have these non-spotless issues in our life. That's where we then would place blame. That's where we would then not be at peace. That's where we would attack others. There's so much sin that entered the world after Adam and Eve turned their backs on God. So finding every effort to be found as spotless as we can. We're never going to be perfect. We know that. We've talked about that on the podcast before. But if we can make efforts to find ways to be a better person, to lean closer to God, to recognize our faults when we have them, and to ask for forgiveness and to forgive others when they hurt us, that is going to take so much of a beautiful thing and make it an even more amazing thing, because you're going to be pushing towards that perfect, spotless nature. Like I said, nobody's ever going to be perfect. Only Jesus and only God. Those are the only perfect beings that will ever exist. But we can get on the right track. We can set ourselves up to say, hey, look, God, when you look at my heart, when you look at my soul, you can tell that I am making an effort to be as pure as I can by what I watch, what I say, what I wear, what I do. I'm trying all that I can to make sure that I am in a perfect form for you. Now, I think the second word, blameless, is a word that really is prevalent in our world today, because if you've got kids, mine, I've only got one outside the womb right now. I've got a second one on the way. For those that may have not heard or not, my wife is pregnant, so we're very excited about that. If you have any baby name suggestions, feel free to send the show an email, versetodaypod@gmail.com, or send us a message on our Facebook and Instagram pages. But for blameless, how often do we see this? Mom, it wasn't me, it was Jimmy. Or, Mom, it wasn't me, Susie did it. We never accept blame when we are accused of something, right? We are all about a society, I would say it's been for a long time, really, that it's not me, it's you, it's not me, it's someone else. I would never do that. Even if the evidence all points to us, what's our first reaction? It wasn't me, someone else did it. We see that at the highest level of politics, we see that in sports, we see that in entertainment, we see that at the lowest level in our homes, we see that in churches. People have a very hard time accepting blame for something, because then that means they have to go on the record to say, yes, I messed up, I'm wrong. And that's not fun. No one likes saying that they were wrong. I don't like it. No one likes it, because it hurts. It means you've sinned. It means you've done something that probably hurt other people. So making every effort to be found blameless is so vital, because that does require that honesty. That does require that forgiveness dealt out. It's not easy. It's very uncomfortable most days. We see this all the time, even with Jesus' apostles. Those were the closest guys to Jesus. They were still trying to blame others. They were still trying to pin different things on each other and on the people as well, too, as opposed to accepting their faults and accepting their mishaps. And finally, be found with him by being at peace with him. This is a phrase that I feel like is mentioned a lot by older folks when they get towards the tail end of their life. I've heard many people say this. I've heard my grandma, who's in her 90s, say this. She said that, yeah, I'm at peace with God. He can take me anytime he wants. I think that's sometimes hard for us younger people to hear, because, you know, the thought of dying, I mean, I'm 26 years old right now. The thought of dying is kind of scary, you know? It's still kind of uncertain, is still kind of not really what I think, you know, I would like to have happen to me right now. I've got still so much life to live, you know? We go through that denial checklist in our minds of what, you know, but God, you know, but wait a minute, what about this? I want to see my son graduate. I want to see my son get married, you know, this, that, and the other. We have this long list of things. But it's okay, because we can still be at peace with God and not necessarily have to be dying because of that. Obviously, yes, if you've never been at peace with God, you've never righted your wrongs before you die, please do that, because that will be the ultimate swing of where you may potentially end up spending the rest of your eternity. So how do we become at peace with God? I think for that, it really stems down to how do we react when things do and don't go our way, because we need to be at peace with what God has planned for our lives. We all have this grand idea of what we want to do, what we want to accomplish, who we want to marry, who we want to date, how many kids, how many dogs, size of house, the car, everything. But then we apply our worldly view to it, and then God comes in and says, that's great, thanks so much for submitting this for my consideration, but I've got a predestined, pre-laid plan for you, because I have a specific way I want to use you while you're on this earth. So then we have to be sure that we are going to be okay and at peace with God for how he has our life laid out and planned for him. I've mentioned this before. I was not at peace with God saying that he wanted me to work in the ministry and to go back to school. I didn't want to go back to school, for sure. I got out of college as fast as I could. I did all my 4 years and I was done. And then when I heard that God wanted me to go back to school and wanted me to go to work in ministry, I thought it was crazy. I said, hey, I love church, I love helping out, I love volunteering, but if you're asking me to potentially become a pastor and shepherd a church, that's a lot of responsibility that I just don't know if I want to deal with. And it took me several years to finally get to a place mentally, spiritually, and emotionally that I was at peace with that and saying, all right, God, if this is what you want for me and this is what you want for my life, even though I am very uncomfortable with it at this moment, I know you will provide me with the right tools and the right important information to do what is your will. So, what do you need to be found in order to be found spotless, in order to be found blameless, and to be at peace with God today? We've all got different stories. We've all got different places in our life that we need to reconcile with and that we need to ask forgiveness on. Sometimes we've been harboring things for years and nobody even knows. So take some time to self-reflect today and see how you can check those 3 boxes to become closer to God today, because nobody knows not only when Jesus is coming back, but more specifically, nobody knows when our time on this earth is done. And I don't know about you, but if my time were to go tomorrow, I would want to make sure that I've got my heart set right with God, so that way I know that when I pass from this earth to eternity, that I'm spending it with Him in heaven. You've been listening to the Verse of the Day podcast, hosted by Baxter Colburn on Public House Media. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Verse of the Day. It comes out 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The podcast can be found by subscribing on Google Play Podcasts and wherever good podcasts are found. More information about Verse of the Day podcast can be found by going to thephmedia.com.